There are many reasons people will meditate, such as wanting to reduce stress or improve focus. Traditional Buddhism goes beyond that, however, where the ultimate goal of meditation is to awaken to the true nature of reality, recognize the self as an illusion, free oneself from desire, and thereby find liberation from all suffering. Pretty light stuff. There are many types of meditation. In Shamatha, or tranquility meditation, you focus on something simple, such as the breath, and as you practice, you develop stronger focus and concentration. In more advanced states of this meditation, people can reach blissful absorption states known as the jhanas. Traditionally, Shamatha meditation was intended to prepare for Vipassana, or insight meditation, which aims to achieve insight into the nature of reality by paying close attention to phenomena as they arise and pass away. These paths of meditation are challenging, so other traditions emphasize more direct approaches, which involve techniques to directly look for the self and notice it cannot be found. In today's podcast, I discuss meditation with Matthew Immergut, the co-author of the book The Mind Illuminated. He spent years assisting John Yates, the primary author, to produce a detailed guide to meditation. The book describes the path of meditation as 10 stages, where a person progressively increases their ability to focus their attention on the breath, while also deepening their peripheral awareness of the rest of the mind. The structured approach leads to greater equanimity and joy, and is eventually intended to lead to the traditional awakening. The book combines clear instructions about meditation with interludes describing how the mind works. In our discussion, Matthew describes why he meditates, why he doesn't think it's a silver bullet for self-improvement. He provides some practical tips for meditation, and we discuss much more. Hey, hello, everyone. My guest today is Matthew Immergut. Matthew is the Associate Professor of Sociology at Purchase College and the co-author of The Mind Illuminated, which is a popular book on meditation that goes into deep details about the steps of meditation and also connects it with how the mind works. Matthew, maybe just to get started, can you maybe give me a brief overview of your background and how you got into meditation?
A brief overview. Okay. That's tricky, but I can do it. It probably, I don't know why, junior high school, I probably tried to meditate. I remember this Time Life series of encyclopedias, and it was of the occult. And there was one of witchcraft, one of sorcery. And somewhere in those books, I think there was discussion of meditation. I can't remember the UFOs, all paranormal kind of stuff. And I gravitated towards it, sporadically. And then in high school, I had friends who were interested in it. And in college, also an interest, a number of experiences that happened in college, a lot of them in the context of nature. But it was really kind of post-college, postgraduate school that the dabbling became very serious. And so I don't want to go through all of that because it's just too much. It's not that interesting. But I think it really became serious when I did a Vipassana course, my first Vipassana course, 10-day. Are you familiar with Vipassana? Did you do a 10-day?
No, I've signed up actually for the Mind Illuminated one, but I haven't taken it yet. So okay. I haven't done anything intense yet.
This is in the tradition of Goenka, Sen Goenka, I think it's SN. And it's really like a meditation boot camp. What's interesting about the model is it's free and you only pay after you go through it, but you can't do less than 10 days. In any case, I think I talked about this with Amir on Awakening in his podcast, where it was an experience on that retreat with meditation that really transformed me and made meditation as a practice kind of central to my life. So I know I've skipped a whole bunch of stuff, but so it's always been there in the background and in the foreground at other times, but it was really that 10-day retreat where I just had some profound experiences, and I came out of that 10-day retreat being like, oh man, I had no idea of what was possible in this exploration of the mind. And from that, it was over 20 years ago. From that moment on, it's been kind of full steam ahead for sure.
I guess if you're okay discussing it, where do you view meditation more as a secular practice, or are there certain beliefs that you've adopted with it, or how do you approach that?
When you say secular, tell me what you're thinking.
I could imagine someone meditating just because they feel that brings peace of mind, or maybe even other things like that, but nothing beyond that. And then on the other extreme, someone could believe every Buddhist belief connected to it.
I see. I definitely don't approach it as secular, but I don't see any problem with that. Like, I definitely think if anybody who seriously takes the secular, like just I want a little more peace of mind, and they actually seriously engage in practice, I think that the kind of deeper questions will naturally arise out of that. And they don't necessarily have to be religious, they could be just existential. Like, well, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be a limited being, a finite being? There was some physicist, Cox, who said, what does it mean to be a finite being in an infinite universe? And so I think those questions will naturally arise, even if someone's just coming in for peace of mind. I also think the other thing is that meditation doesn't always bring peace of mind. I think there's been a real marketing strategy about meditation as making you peaceful. And that's true, it can do that, but it also can stir really difficult stuff up. And probably the most difficult thing it'll stir up is having to look at how crazy the mind is. People come in and they're like, I want to be peaceful. That's why I want to learn to meditate. It's like, you got to buckle up because that's a ways down the road. For some people, it will work. I'm not saying for everybody. But for most people, they sit down and they're quiet and they watch their breath and they realize they can't watch the breath and their minds are out of control. And then the problem is they think the meditation's making them out of control. But what we're really seeing for the first time is how insane our minds are. So I don't really equate meditation with peace, if that makes sense. Although, let me put a caveat with that. With John Kabat-Zinn and all of the great mindfulness teachers, there is a way to teach it where relaxation and gentleness and peacefulness is an important part of the process. It's just never really been the main motivator for me for engaging in the practice. It felt like I've got like a really powerful instrument. I was going to say a quantum computer, even though I don't even know what that is, but I know, But I've got a very powerful instrument, and I'm using it as a paperweight, right? Like, I'm not accessing the full potential. And again, I'm not saying that secular meditative quality is a bad thing. It's not. It's very appropriate and very helpful for a lot of people. It's just never been that interesting to me.
Right. I guess in a second we could go more into like exactly what meditation is. But even if one is going beyond it being peaceful, there could be all these other beliefs, let's say as part of Buddhism, they adopt with it, or they could approach it more, like Sam Harris style, where they take it very seriously as transformative, but it's still somewhat secular in a way. So I was just wondering like how you view that.
For me personally, I think there is some contact with the extraordinary, or some people call it the absolute, something sacred. I don't know what you want to call it, the divine, God. Whatever, all those labels and names. There's something, I don't know, deep, profound happening when you learn to practice and meditate. And I wouldn't give it necessarily a label like God, or I just would say that something, to me, feels like something very sacred is happening. And when I think sacred, something different than our normal orientation, something different, like the landscape of possibilities opens up to what a human life means and what we actually have the capacity to contact. So for me, it's not a secular endeavor, but it's not like a really simple, like, oh yeah, I'm in touch with God or the eternal, or, all that language. I don't even have a language for it. But there's something more than just a kind of self-betterment happening, for sure. Like, that's not my goal, self-betterment, because it's not working. It probably is working. I just don't have another me to compare, the one who doesn't meditate to the one who does meditate. Yeah. So, self-betterment. Like, that's probably why people, I guess that's what you're asking, like, do I do it for like kind of self-improvement? Like that kind of secular kind of like hacking the mind kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like where do you view it? And then we could go more in detail, like, go
I don't know.
Way.
It's a weird thing because I'm totally into hacking the mind. I think it's whatever that means, and it's kind of cool and fun. I think we live in a culture of silver bullets, and we're looking for the silver bullet to hack the mind. And, it just changes. 1 year it's CBD, the next year it's meditation. Then the year after that it's yoga, or breath work seems to be really, people are doing a lot of breathing. And I don't think there's a silver bullet. I don't believe that there's any silver bullet to transformation, to self-transformation, at least in my experience. I find that very often people who have, silver bullet experiences, which I'm sure they happen where they're completely transformed, sooner or later fall back to their old neurotic patterns. Maybe a little lighter, and they still have to work on them. So, in a way, meditation has revealed to me the willingness to be okay with being imperfect and all the flaws and all the shadows and all the messiness that I want to escape through meditation, that I want to hack out of the system. I don't think maybe it's hackable, in an easy way, but for me, the only thing that meditation seems to be helpful with is accepting what is. Accepting my neurosis, accepting my shadows, not acting on them, hopefully, but just, okay, I'm imperfect. And that whole idea of perfection and transcendence, and I'm going to be like a saint, or like I'm going to be a perfect human being, specimen. Meditation, I don't think that's worked for me. But when we get into like the realm of like really hacking the system and upgrading the system, it's not that I don't want to do it. It's just that my upgrades are really slow. The new versions are really slow. And listen, if I'm alone on a meditation retreat, I feel like I'm doing really, really well. The minute I come back into a relationship, specifically with my wife, all that stuff, all the ideals that I have, all of the perfection, all of the kind of transcendent me, just, like a gravity just comes crashing down to earth.
But like if someone just isn't familiar with meditation on a deeper level and you wanted to define it for them and they don't know so much about it, just a typical person off the street, what would you say, like, how do you define the practice and just like the basic goals in a way that they would get?
Okay, so I would say, I would make a distinction because people will often come up to me and say, oh, I swim to meditate, or I paint, or I walk in nature. And I make a distinction that I got from a very good friend of mine, Will Duncan, between meditative and meditation. Meditative is anything we do to relax the nervous system, to feel at ease and peace, such as walking in nature or swimming. Meditation is a formal practice where we're sitting down and actually working with the mind to develop specific skills. So it's actually, and that's the key, it's a formal practice that you set time aside for, where you're working on specific kind of cognitive skills and abilities. So that's how I would define meditation. One of those skills and abilities is sustained attention. So I would just make that distinction between meditative and meditation. So that would be my 2-minute version.
So I guess in a way, many of these meditation apps that have like 5-minute meditation to feel good or things like that, could maybe instead they should be rephrased as meditative apps because they're not working that hard on training the mind?
I don't know, because I don't know any apps. Like I don't work with any apps, but if that's what they're doing, like relaxing the system, those are meditative. If they're formally working to develop certain kind of specific cognitive abilities and skills, then I would define that as meditation. Both are necessary, by the way, I would say. Both are absolutely crucial and important. One's not superior than the other, especially if you do longer meditation retreats where you're training the mind. Sometimes you need to have that meditative relaxation because you're working too intensely, like the system's too ramped up, so you need to take a walk in nature. You need to do something relaxing. So meditative is as important as meditation. It's just that we're doing something very different when we're learning to meditate, the way I teach it and think about it. Yeah.
And when you say you're training the mind, so what are you training the mind for in meditation?
Well, that's where it gets into your personal intention, right? You could train the mind. So what are the two kind of basic skills we're trying to work on with meditation? One is attention, right? Stability of attention, the ability to move your attention to where you want it to go, to keep it there for as long as you want, and to control how wide or how narrow. So those are 3 different skills just with attention that we're training in meditation, versus awareness, which is much more about mindfulness, awareness of what's happening in the mind, what's the overall mood, awareness of where attention's moving. Also, we're working on this global awareness simultaneously. Why someone wants to do that is really personal. For some people, it could be to explore consciousness. And you're just going to be able to explore your consciousness a lot better if your attention is stable and you have a kind of clear mindfulness, right? Rather than your attention swinging all over the place. It'll also make you a better, better at possibly at focusing at work because you have some skill with your attention. The reason that I would do it is because I'm interested in the workings of the mind and I'm interested in the exploration of the mind. And so a stable attention and a clear awareness is going to give me deeper and deeper access into the primary programming that's happening. So for me, it's about, and that's what people would say, like awakening, right? Like that's what's interesting to me. Like that's why I like to meditate, is because I like this idea of insight, because insights emerge from a mind that's calm and settled and clear and bright and focused versus a mind that's chaotic and distracted. The seeds of insight might not sprout as easily. They do still sprout even in a chaotic, disturbed mind. It's just, for most people, it's less likely than a mind that's well trained. Yeah.
So when you say that you're interested in understanding the mind, is that just like a curiosity, like similar to like an intellectual curiosity, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I think there's an experiential curiosity. I'm not so interested in the intellectual curiosity of the mind. I'm more interested in the experiential. I think when I first did that Vipassana retreat, I had some experiences that I just didn't know were possible. Disillusion of the body, right? I think they call it Bhangra in Vipassana. And just a series of other experiences, some mundane, where it was like understanding addiction at a deep, deep level. And understand how I was addicted at a deep, deep level. So those are kind of two different insights. And so what was driving me really after that was the exploration of consciousness. Like and specifically altered states of consciousness, because both of those times I was in an altered state of consciousness. So it's really driven by some deep practices like jhana, absorption concentrations, certain rapture states. That was really what's motivating. But there came to a certain point where those I realized, just like everything else, will just dissipate, will just pass. They're just temporary states and then they disappear, right? They're really cool to go into and I'm a fan of them to alter my consciousness at will. But it's just like anything else. It arises and it passes away. And so I'm more interested in the insight that comes from those experiences. Oh, look, this is a rapturous moment. And it's gone. It's caused in conditions, and when those causes and conditions are gone, this experience is gone. And so how do I navigate my life knowing that everything, everybody, everyone I love, everything I love will disappear, will be gone, disappear completely, like absolutely annihilated, disappear. So how do I navigate, and what's the insight that's going to help me, or the wisdom, let's just call it, what's the wisdom that's going to help me navigate that? And that's why I'm interested more in insight rather than altered states of consciousness. I'm also more interested in experience, in experiential wisdom, rather than an intellectual wisdom. An experiential wisdom which transforms the way I act in the world and behave in the world. So that's really why I meditate. Now, and this changes. I mean, why people choose to meditate will change for people throughout their life. Like, it could be for peace of mind, it could be for altered states of consciousness, it could be awakening, it could be whatever. There's no right reason to take up meditation. The only reason to take up meditation is the personal reason for you. Like, why is it important to you? That's the good reason. That's the right, correct reason. And so for me, I would say insight, awakening, and wisdom at an experiential level is what draws me to the practice.
Okay, I guess since you've referenced, these powerful states and awakening and all these things, it raises a question, let's say, for a typical person who hasn't experienced any of this, but they're interested in it. They want to know, should they do meditation? How do they know if they'll be able to achieve anything with it? Maybe they'll just, practice for many years and it will go nowhere. They don't think people are all making it up, but they just don't know if it'll work for them. So What should one tell such people?
Well, first of all, you're right, it might not. I would want to know why. Like, what's the interest? Let's talk about the interest and let's go from there. What's the curiosity? If I can remove the doubt, right? Doubt's always going to be there. Doubt is important. It's actually, I would say discernment is important. Doubt becomes a problem because it saps our energy from trying. But being discerning as to whether this is working for you or not is very important. And I think the individual has to figure out and discern for themselves what working means for them and give it a try. So there's different people who say different things. Some people say you have to try a practice for 2 weeks and you'll know it. If you don't see results, don't do the practice, do another practice. And then there are people who say do it for 20 years and don't expect anything, even after 20 years. So somewhere between 2 weeks and 20 years is just pick a time, but give it a shot. That's what I would say. What's driving your curiosity? Don't let doubt not hinder you, but be discerning. And it's kind of like go with an open mind and just jump in and see what happens. There's no harm in trying. But get out of the idea that there's going to be like a big success, or like I'm going to sit down, I'm going to be peaceful in 2 weeks or something. Small goals. And in the end of it, listen, you don't have to do it. It's not for everybody.
So what would you say would be small goals to start with that a person, to see if it's working for them?
Listen, you sit down, enjoy yourself, first of all, and do 5 minutes. Say 5 minutes one day. That's it. And if that feels good, if it feels too short, go to 6 minutes the next day, or go 6 minutes, go increase to 1 minute a week and see how it goes. Don't make it a chore. Don't make it another thing to do. Make it like you're taking a little vacation from your life. Just a vacation time. That's it. Just vacation. 5-minute vacation. That's it. And then increase slowly and enjoy yourself. It's not always going to be enjoyable, but find the experiences that are enjoyable in it. Who was I listening to recently? That guy, Andrew Huberman. I was just curious I think he did a whole episode on dopamine. I was very curious about dopamine. I still don't totally understand it, but he had a really interesting piece of advice. He said, if you want to build a habit, try to find something in the activity that you're enjoying. Don't do the thing where you reward yourself. So I think he was told, so like you go to the gym and you're like, well, I'm going to have an ice cream sundae afterwards. What you want to do is you want to activate your dopamine system before. I may be misquoting him, by the way. But so that means in the actual activity, find something that is challenging, enjoyable within the practice itself, because then you're going to release dopamine and then it's going to be more likely you're going to do it. I think he referenced David Goggins, who just is like a sadist, like he loves pain. No, masochist, he loves. But if you listen to him, what he's done, he's hacked the system and he's made suffering like a kind of dopamine release. I'm not saying do that, by the way. And I might have this whole dopamine thing wrong, but I would just say find something in the practice that's enjoyable. And it can be, I just sat down and I breathed deeply and relax. And just that relaxation is tuning the mind. So that's what I would say to the person, to the busy skeptic.
Right. I mean, I guess the question is, for most people, the idea of focusing on their breath or something similar just sounds painful to them. So I don't think they would see it as enjoyable. So I just wonder, is that just giving up on most people?
And then I would talk to that person. Again, everybody's so different. And I would say, listen, let's work with a different object. The breath is just an object for stabilizing attention. It happens to be a particularly good object because it's fairly neutral. So our attention's moving most of the days to things we like and don't like, don't like. So our attention automatically moves that way. The breath is a good place to train it because we're trying to move out of that attentional dynamic because the breath is fairly neutral. And if I can train to keep my attention on something that's neutral, then I'm going to have more control over my attentional system rather than its normal movement of, I don't like that, I like that, I don't like that, I like that. But the breath is an arbitrary object. There's all sorts of objects. And so for someone who really finds the breath difficult, I would suggest more of the heart practices. I would suggest focusing on love or on pleasure or on, they call it the Brahma Viharas in Buddhism, the divine abodes. And there's 4 kind of meditation objects: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So I would veer someone who's has an aversion to the breath and sounds boring towards more of that, the feeling of love. And if that didn't work, maybe a candle. There's something else called a nimitta. A visualization might work for them. So there's lots of different objects you can choose to learn to meditate, because the basic foundation of what you're doing in the formal training is the same. You're going to put your attention on whatever the object is, and it's going to wander off. And you're going to have to bring it back. Right? And in the simplest way, that's going to happen no matter what the object is of your attention, whether it's the breath, whether it's love, it doesn't matter. You're doing the same thing. Yeah. So don't worry about the breath. Don't have to worry. Do something different. And I would work with you, or someone will work with you to find a different object.
Right. I mean, I guess a related question, like that was just more people who haven't meditated yet, but even people who have meditated, like I know in my case, I did like follow the Mind Illuminated and focus on the breath. And then eventually I feel like I plateaued at it and I didn't achieve, anything so amazing. So it's also even there hard to know, like, do I continue at it? Is it something I should try something else? I'm not at the level, like I don't find it painful, but I didn't feel that I got, where I wanted to go.
Well, so, I mean, this is a longer conversation where I would say, well, where did you want to go? What was your intention?
I mean, some of it's the things you mentioned, achieving kind of these insights, or even on a smaller scale, maybe just having a deeper understanding of how thoughts and emotions just pass through and not self-identifying with them. And also the curiosity and, yeah, a whole range of those things.
And so if you were to say, like, okay, in the Mind Illuminated system, it's very stage-based. What stage would you say you were moving through?
So I guess I would say I'm around stage 3. Maybe sometimes I go into 4 or whatever, but like around that stage out of the 10 stages.
Yeah. And so how long were you sitting for? Like on a day-to-day basis?
Usually it's like 25 to 35 minutes, something like that.
Okay. And in that 25, 30 minutes, how much on average, not your good sits, not your bad sits, but on average, were you on the breath, would you say? Not easy to tell, but would you say, like, out of the 25 minutes, you were on the breath 5 minutes, 1 minute, and then...
No, it's most of the time my mind wanders, and then I bring it back, and my mind wanders, I bring it back. But I don't usually have, like, very long mind wanderings.
Okay. So you were saying, it's like, so you have momentary concentration, the mind wanders, you bring it back.
Right.
Okay. And did you do the whole routine where you appreciated the return?
I don't know if I did it deeply enough. I tried to, like, not have a negative thought. I'm sure there were, like, negative thoughts that crept in, but...
Yeah, like, I'm not doing this right? Like, I'm not as far as I want. You see, so that's the deal, right? It's such an important point. That appreciation of the mind waking up from mind wandering. So you're on the breath, you're focused. You mind wander and you wake up. Remember, and this is really amazing, it's like, you didn't wake your mind up from mind wandering. There was just some part of your mind that woke you up. It was like you remembered to mail a check, or I have a check to mail. You remember to write an email. There was a part of your mind that said, hey, you're not doing what you wanted to do. You wanted to focus on the breath, and now you're off thinking about, whatever you're thinking about. And the minute that you're like, damn it, I can't believe this, you're basically telling that part of the mind, don't interrupt me when I'm mind wandering. You're chastising the very thing that's going to help you stop mind wandering. And so that's why we emphasize so much in the book, appreciate that moment when you realize, well, the mind realizes you're not doing what you wanted to do. Feel good about it. Relax. Be happy. It's not always easy, and it gets dry, and we can be like, yeah, okay, come back. So at certain times in my practice, I would be like, see balloons falling. I would just do anything to have a little authentic appreciation of the return. And it really makes a difference. It really does, And then the return back to the breath is like doing a push-up. You don't want your back all slack when you do a push-up. You're exercising the attentional skills, the attentional muscles, every time you return to the breath of the nose. You're actually strengthening the return muscle. And then you come back to the breath. So you want to do that in a relaxed, disciplined way. No chastisement, no judgment, and then recenter on the breath and relax. That's really important when you return. And take your time, come back, relax. Enjoy that you're out of mind wandering. Enjoy the fact that you're back where you want to be, and then continue. So that's what I would say, is either do that, start back up on that, or shift to another practice. See how that goes. I would do metta, loving kindness practice. See how that works.
Right. Now, I guess then in terms of it more generally, like a person who gets stuck should try to get feedback and see what they could do to fix it. And then at a certain point, with no set amount of time, then they should try and switch to a different approach.
I think so. I think this is one of the good reasons to have a teacher or a guide or someone to help you. The important thing, and maybe ChatGPT or someone who could do this, is you could, as a meditation coach. I did just read that people are doing psychedelic journeys with AI as a sitter for their psychedelic
Oh, wow.
journey,
There's no,
which
no
is,
risk to that.
if you look online, you'll find it. It's insane. But I get maybe you could use AI to do your meditation guide. But when I work with people and when I'm also being guided by a teacher, the key thing is I understand something of your mind. Like I understand a little bit about you, how your mind works and what you're going to be leaning towards, what your disposition is. And I can listen to you and then I can make a suggestion. You go and try it. And then you come back to me and we say, how'd it go? And you're like, it worked great. It didn't work at all. We tweak the system again. So I do think that's the benefit of having a teacher who understands your mind. And this is the other thing, is you have to have a common language too. Because people say attention and awareness and mindfulness, and it means lots of different things that can get very sloppy. I think this is one of the benefits of the Mind Illuminated, is that the language is very specific because we're trying to communicate between two minds, and it's very subtle states. So we need a common language to do that. So I do think the Mind Illuminated does that really well. It makes sure we're talking about the same thing. But you can do that with any teacher. You just learn their language and, get the feedback before you give up.
Yeah, I guess one more thing. A lot of people aren't naturally interested in meditation, but do you think if people knew more about it, it's something really that everyone should do and that they would benefit from? Or is it maybe just something that only a minority of people really have the tendency towards?
I don't know. That's a great question. According to people like John Kabat-Zinn and the people in the mindfulness movement, everybody should be doing it. It seems to be beneficial. I don't necessarily see that. It's like, I was going to say like everybody needs to go to college, but I don't want to get into that territory. I don't know if everybody needs to go to college. I don't think everybody needs to meditate. I mean, I just thought of this with salvific technology, right? I mean, it's presented as a salvific technology, but in the context of Buddhism or any other religious context, it's always along with a whole worldview. It's along with ethics. It's along with wisdom. Panya, sila, samadhi, panya. Sila is morality, right? This is for Buddhism. Sila is morality. Your morality has to be oriented correctly. Samadhi is the concentration, the meditation piece, and panya is the wisdom, the learning, the teaching, the worldview. So I don't know about extracting meditation from that trinity or from any religious system and then implanting it somewhere else decontextualized is necessarily going to be it's a word panacea, like what's a cure-all. It's again, we live in a cure-all. I'm reading this book, a very interesting book, The Immortality Key. The Immortality Key. It's about psychedelics. Have you read it? You're familiar with it?
No.
It's really interesting. You should check it out. But implicit in it is like this idea that psychedelics are going to save humanity. Like we just need to get and revitalize religion. And maybe, I'm not a one silver bullet kind of guy. I don't think there's a thing or an activity that human beings are going to do and need to do for like a universal benefit. What was that?
What if they all did metta towards each other and then like it resolved all conflict?
I don't know. Maybe it's possible. I think it was TM, Transcendental Meditation, who actually had a claim like that. I'm outside my wheelhouse. I don't know much about TM, but I do believe at some point they got like a global meditation movement going where if they got the vibrational energies really high, it would make a transformation. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think everybody needs to meditate, no.
Okay, interesting. Because like I feel like there might be a traditional view that like everyone is suffering and this is the only way to like escape it or something.
Well, look at it this way. Here it's interesting because if you look at Buddhist countries, let's say Tibet, or even in Sri Lanka, traditional India, northern India, and you look at where Buddhism sprouted, and you look at Buddhism in the last 200 years or so, in these countries, it's very much like Christianity is here. It's just a religion. And very few people ever meditate, even monks. In the Tibetan tradition, it's very interesting. It's much more of a scholastic tradition. So when you get your Geshe degree, which is like your PhD in Tibetan, or in Tibetan philosophy or Buddhism, basically, you have a choice to make. You can either go the yogi path or the teacher path, right? You become a teacher. And the yogi path requires a 3-year, 3-month, 3-day meditation retreat where you take those teachings and you imbibe them in this deep meditative practice. As far as I understand it, very, very few Tibetans, at least traditionally, took the yogi path. Most of them took the scholar path. And that's also true in Theravada Buddhism. I mean, you can read, and there's a great number of really good histories that talk about how it was Western interest in Buddhism and in meditation that made a lot of those Eastern traditions focus on meditation because it was the most secular piece that would get the most credibility. It's a kind of legacy of colonization and a legacy of the scientific revolution and of these countries saying, oh, this meditation thing is actually important. So monks weren't even meditating in a lot of traditions. They were serving the community. They still are serving the community. They're doing rites and rituals, births, deaths, all of that kind of stuff that rabbis and priests do. So even in Buddhist countries, I think it's fairly rare for that kind of universal emphasis on meditation.
So that's interesting. So even the places that did the most to develop meditation, you're saying it was still pretty rare, and that might imply that it's just not for everyone, or at least it's just very challenging.
I think it's like, look, you have to have a certain amount of, it's a practice of the elite. Because a farmer who's working, sun up to sundown, isn't going to have the luxury to sit in meditation per se. Right? So there's a
Or
certain,
maybe in the winter when they're not harvesting. I don't
yeah,
know.
maybe, but is that really what they're going to want to do? I don't know.
Right.
What most of those countries, and again, this is a huge gloss. So when I say most of those countries, let's say in like, I don't know, some Sri Lanka or Thailand, the hope is you serve the monks so that they have the time. Like you feed the monks, so the monks have nothing and they're dependent on the lay people for their sustenance, so that then they can go and meditate. Right? And what the lay people hope for is a better rebirth, hopefully to be able to meditate and do those things. We had a group of people in the 60s in particular who went over to these Eastern countries and found the rarefied teachers, the real exclusive kind of deep practitioners. And they came back here, and because Americans are very impatient, they didn't want to go through all the other stuff. They wanted the heart teachings. And that's what it's like the elite monastic teachings got spread democratically in the United States. Meditation being one of those pieces. Now, again, there's a historian who's probably like, what is he talking about? But, that's my understanding. I could be wrong. So I'm going to hedge my bet. So no, meditation hasn't been for everybody. And I don't think it necessarily is for everybody. But for people who choose it, it's a real gift. It's a real gift to give yourself. I mean, such a gift.
And just to maybe understand the gift a little more, since you mentioned before that it doesn't make you a perfect person or all that. So how would you summarize, I guess, what the gift is of meditation?
I mean, it changes it's like sticking to anything, I think. The gift changes. It's like any discipline. Like, is there something you've done over the course of your life where what we're calling the gift, the reward has shifted or changed? Maybe it's playing piano. Maybe it's dedication to a project. The gift is always changing. I was just talking to my brother-in-law. He runs a company, and he was just realizing recently like how rewarding the creative process is. Like he wouldn't have said that 3 years ago, but that reward, because he stuck it out. So there's no kind of universal gift of meditation. I think it's just it's like sticking to anything and being receptive and open. You're going to discover something. I think with meditation, for me, the gifts have always just changed. They've just shifted, sometimes in a year, sometimes in a month, sometimes over 5 years. And just lately, I've just been so grateful to be able to just sit still, just to have that refuge of just sitting still and just allowing whatever's happening and just be able to do that. This has felt like such a gift. And I wouldn't have said that 3 years ago. I would have been more driven. I'm much more interested in jhanas or whatever. I think somewhere in the Pali scriptures, the Buddha says, it's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end. And he's talking about Buddhism, but I would say practice, spiritual practice of any type. It's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end. Yeah. I'll give you one more example. I might have told you this. Uh, After college, I was about 3 years in the Orthodox Hasidic world. And Baal Tshuvas, returnees. I was within that realm. I think you're pretty familiar with Baal Tshuvas, people who are returnees. And I remember I met this rabbi. He was like, especially, it was like halacha, on kitchens, like koshering kitchens. But he was a Baal Tshuva, in Chabad. And I remember having a conversation with him one night, and he said, I was talking about my own doubts about the practices to fill in and davening. And he said, I've gone through, I just keep doing it. I keep doing it. And as I keep doing it, the rewards or the gifts just come. Sure, it's a struggle sometimes, it's painful. I don't know why I'm doing it, I've got doubt. But he felt like just because he stuck it out, there was a deep reward. Yeah. So that's a similar kind of thing. Don't be so fixated on what you think you want if you're going to start a meditation practice. Don't be so sure you know the gift that's going to use them. Hold them lightly. Have a goal. Hold it very lightly. It's good to have a goal. It's good to be focused, but hold it lightly. Let things evolve too. You gotta have both energy. Have kind of an open, receptive energy, and you have to have an active, engaged energy. And it's a dance. It's a constant dance.
So like you were trying at that point Orthodox Hasidic Judaism, and then you did shift at some point. So I don't know if you want to talk briefly like why you were drawn to it and then drawn away from it, and then.
Well, so I'll tell you the full story. So I was in San Francisco after college. Had a ride back from San Francisco back to Arizona, where I was going to school, which I was excited about. And I still prayed and meditated. This was college. So in that morning, I just felt lost, And I said, whatever. I said in my meditation, I wouldn't say God, but just like, I just need some direction. And so I walked out to breakfast that morning, and I opened the newspaper, and right there was a Hasidic rabbi on a Harley Davidson at Woodstock 2, the second festival. I don't know if you know this, it was at Woodstock 2. It was in the 90s, and he was handing out apples at Woodstock 2, and there was this little article around. And I was like, there's my guy. That's who I'm supposed to call. So I called him up. His name is Rabbi Langer. I'm sure he's still alive. I'm sure he's in San Francisco still. And I called him up and I said, Rabbi Langer, I told him my story. And he said, listen, come for Shabbos. I said, I can't. I'm leaving I got my ride. I'm ready to go. And he said to me, he says, and I know you're supposed to come for Shabbos. I was like, okay, all right, you're right. You're right. You are correct, Rabbi Langer. So I hung up the phone and I went for Shabbos. By the way, I barely knew what Shabbos was. I'm like, what is Shabbos? No, what are you talking about? Shabbat, Shomer Shabbos, right? Like I knew from the Big Lebowski or something. So I walked in to the Chabad house with the rabbi that night, Friday night, and all the men were davening. And I walked into the main thing, and immediately I was it's described, a ruach, a spirit, a wind overtook me, and I started crying, and I realized I was home. And from that moment on, I just dove deep like that. And I was somebody who was not in that world at all. I was teaching wilderness survival. So that's like, I'm not like, so I went head first because I had this religious experience of coming home and this ruach, the spirit, like I knew I was home. And that led me down that journey. What eventually pulled me out of there was relationships. But to go deeper into that world, I would have to cut my ties, which were very strong to my family. Again, not overtly, no one was saying you have to cut your ties. It was just part of the process. To become deeper, more deeply involved, I would have to let go of the relationships that were important to me. And I wasn't willing to do that. I wasn't willing. And my mother has a story where she says, I battled those rabbis for your soul and I won. So she has a story where she was there. She sent my father to the yeshiva. She said, you got to go see what's going on there because she wasn't allowed in. So, the maternal bond kept me away from the paternal God, So I eventually came out. So that's the kind of short version.
Okay, it's pretty fascinating. I wanted to also turn a little to focus on the Mind Illuminated itself.
Sure.
So I guess one thing that interests me is it kind of develops the whole model of separating between attention, which is the thing you're explicitly focused on, and then awareness just as the things that you're peripherally aware of. So not I don't know, sometimes you hear about awareness in this more mystical sense, but this seems to be something that's very it's just a part of your thinking. So I'm wondering, where does that come from? Is it implicit in the traditional sources and it's just not emphasized as much, or is it its own innovation? And how does that fit into all of traditional meditation?
I think it's a innovation in that it's implicit. It's probably implied, but it's really clearly articulated in the Mind Illuminated. And it's more relying on, I would say, in cognitive neuroscience than it is tradition, for that distinction. You know who makes a really good, and I think this was actually, I became aware of him after the fact of writing the Mind Illuminated, is Ian McGilchrist in split brain research. And he really makes this distinction between attention and awareness as different brain functions. And I think that it makes sense. I think in the tradition, what would happen and what was confusing to people was they'd say, pay attention to your breath, be aware of what's happening. And so attention and awareness would be used in a simultaneous way. The Mind Illuminated, that distinction, I think, helps a lot of people because they do sense this distinction between attention and awareness. And so I would say it's like an innovation, but it's implicit in the tradition, but it's highlighted more because of more recent research on brain functioning. I think it can become a problem because I have seen in my own kind of experience in teaching is people get if they struggle to understand that distinction, they can get really fixated on it. I don't know if it's attention, I don't know if it's awareness, and they get really hyper-focused. And in that situation, it's really important just to relax, to not get so fixated. And the other way I like to help people is when we say awareness, just think of it as mindfulness. Awareness is mindfulness. We're just, are we aware of what the mind is doing, or are we mindfully aware, or are we not? I would say TMI made an innovation there that's been really useful for people, and it can be a hindrance as well at times.
Yeah, I would say on my side, not that I don't, I sort of get what it's getting at, but sometimes when it says focus on the breath, but make sure not to focus too hard and that you still want to be aware of your thoughts, sometimes it could be hard to try to balance all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And people, the people who are attracted to the Mind Illuminated tend to be computer programmers, people who are just very linear, and they're oh, shit, this is just a code, and I just have to we're good. And then they get they're well, I'm focusing on the breath, and I'm aware, but I'm also wondering, it becomes this kind of meta-awareness about the instructions of the Mind Illuminated and if they're doing it right or not. And in that situation, I just pull the plug. I say let's do something else.
You take away the book from them and
no more book. No more book. I mean, of course, we can engage in that distinction, and I can give someone some tools to help highlight that distinction between attention and awareness, which can be helpful. But if it becomes a kind of, which I have seen over and over, a kind of fixation, I take the book away. If they will let me, of course.
So you mentioned that it comes really more from brain science. And I noticed the book actually has these interludes where it goes pretty in depth about how the mind works. And it doesn't really directly reference, at least in the main text, the actual neuroscience, but it seems to be hinting at it. So do you think this understanding of how the mind actually works is important for meditation? And is it really connected with the real neuroscience? Maybe meditation is just an experience disconnected from how the brain really works. Is it? But the book seems to be implying that it actually is connected. So how do you think of those things?
So first of all, what is it called? It's called The Mind Illuminated. What's the subtitle? The merger?
Here, I have the book right here.
A Complete Meditation Guide Integrating Buddhist Wisdom and Brain Science. That subtitle was the publisher. What's in there is more philosophy than science, more philosophical ideas, both from Buddhism and contemporary philosophy, than there is brain science in there. That was the publisher doing that. Now I can't fully blame the publisher. John, liked to think, I think he was working with the brain science, but there's not published studies reference, you know. So I would say that is both the models of the mind are drawn from the Buddhist tradition and from more philosophical than scientific work, for sure. And yeah, I mean, it's a marketing thing. And then people read it, and people who are close readers are like, there's not much brain science in here, and they're right. But I do think the models are valuable. I think they're very valuable and they're very helpful, but they're just models, But they can be extremely helpful for a number of meditative experiences. Attention and awareness being a classic example of a useful model, right? Which has some scientific backing, neurological, cognitive science backing in it. But we didn't reference it. We didn't reference McGilchrist's work.
And do you think that when someone meditates and they reach these very high levels of insight and understanding, they should naturally come to the same thing that people will see when they study the brain scientifically, at least if they reach a high enough level scientifically?
I don't think there's necessarily a relationship about what you're subjectively experiencing, what's objectively being shown on the MRI or whatever. I mean, that's a deep question, and I don't feel like I'm able to answer it, because I just don't know the science that well. So your question is, let me make sure, is the subjective experiences that you're having at high levels, high states, somehow explanatory or helpful for the scientific models of mind?
Well, will they converge on something similar? Since if what you're doing in meditation is seeing the truth in some way, if that's what it is, then in a way they should converge, because even if they're approaching it from different sides.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, there's one book that I'm thinking of. It's called No Self, No Problem. I don't think it's a Buddhist book. I think, well, there's another one, the Self Illusion, which is a science-based illusion, how the self is a product of the brain. It's a construct. And Buddhism will say the exact same thing, right? Like the manifestation of a self, a separate individual self that's stable and solid and continues stably and solidly through, is an illusion. And I do think there is some scientific evidence based on studies that show that the self, that's one example, is a construct of the mind rather than a substance or a thing in the, I think, yeah. So I do think in that case, there's probably some overlap, but I don't know about other states. You're dealing with different realms, or different levels. I can understand neon gas and the activity of neon gas very precisely from a chemical perspective, objectively, like understand the nature of neon, how it works, whatever its dynamics are. But that's not going to tell me anything about a neon sign that says eat at Joe's restaurant. And it's not going to tell me anything about the hungry person who sees the neon sign eat at Joe's restaurant. It's a different kind of meaningful level than the objective neon gas that we're looking at here. Both are true, both are accurate, both are very different in what they're discovering. And I would say that eat at Joe's is more what we're looking at when we're the meaning of that versus the kind of chemical action of neon gas. That's my kind of unprofessional response.
So there's aspects to experience that maybe science doesn't even explain or isn't trying to explain, and that meditation might be going for.
I think so, for sure. Yeah. And maybe there's more and more overlap happening, but, subjective states, non-empirical states, or subjective states are, experiences of God, as far as I know, are not a science. We're not really able, as a science, as an empirical practice, to discuss the non-empirical. I don't know. I don't think the Buddha knew about brain science. I don't think he understood synapses. I don't think he understood the way chemical dopamine uptake inhibitors help his practice or hinder his practice.
Another thing in the book, I guess, is it's focused more on like concentration or like shamatha meditation, and only a little bit on more like, Vipassana and insight meditation. So is it just that that's like preparation for it and you're expected at the end to do it? Or because there are people who also go directly, to Vipassana. So I'm wondering how how it was viewed in the book, and is that like, are most people, is that the best path for most people to do it that way?
I think most people take it as a shamatha book. It's really, we intended it to be both, but it's clearly weighted on the shamatha side because that's where most of the instruction was needed. Theory though, I think John always thought of it as a shamatha vipassana practice. And the Vipassana piece is the awareness piece, the mindfulness piece. In other words, as you're developing your attention, you're also developing your mindful awareness. And in that dynamic, you're always open to the possibility of insight happening because you're aware of the movements and activities of the mind. And I think somewhere in the book we say insight is an accident, and meditation makes you accident prone. Or awakening is an accident. And all meditation is doing is making you accident prone. So that means that insight and awakening can happen at any stage. It really can. It can happen spontaneously. For some people, I know people who it happens to, but for most of us, we're going to have to work on it. And if we were just developing shamatha, concentration, we would just be singularly focused. But in the TMI practice, there's the singular focus and the mindfulness. Therefore, the possibility of insight arises. Most people don't take it that way. To do insight practice, you do need some stability of attention. You do. I think it works better. I think that if you've got the skill set from stage 4, even stage 3, you've stabilized your attention more. You're just going to engage in insight practices with a greater ease. So I think that's where the book leans, and I would lean someone towards that. I would say, look, you could start an insight practice, but let's develop some basic musculature of your skills, of your attention, just to stage 4. We don't have to worry about stage 6 or any of that other stuff. Just to stage 4, and then you can do insight practices, whatever you want. But because you're going to have that stability of attention and that mindfulness, that's just going to be beneficial to then shifting over to insight.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in the book it seems more geared at like, oh, you reach these very high levels, and then when you're at the very high levels, like in later stages in the book, then you notice these very fine things that you don't notice before in how the mind works, and like very low level details that usually are hidden from the mind, and then that helps you go towards insight. And that seems to be like the main approach, but you're saying that there's sort of like this implicit approach.
I mean, that's the mystery, right? See, it's a strange thing because like we're talking about accidents, awakening is an accident, and meditation makes you accident prone. If you just think about insights when they come, in general, they come when you're least expecting them, when you're relaxed, right? They always talk about people in the shower having insights. And there's been a lot of studies on how people have insights, or what is the criteria or the precursors to insight. But the strange thing about meditation is that what you're kind of really doing, you're really learning to let go. And it's almost like you're doing all this work to learn to let go. And when we let go, that's when insight and awakening happen. The problem is that if you try to let go, you're trying. There's a great book, I think it's called Trying Not to Try. And in the beginning of it, he talks about this science game, Mind Ball. And you have two people, it's in the science museum, two people sitting next to each other. They have headbands on, and there's a metal ball in front of them. And the only way that metal ball will move forward is if you completely relax. So you've got two people completely relaxing, and the ball goes, and then they get excited, and then the ball stops. Right? And that kind of gets at the dilemma we're facing here, is that we're working really hard, in a sense, not hard, skillfully with the mind, training it. And ultimately to do what? Is just to let go. So there's like a deep kind of spiritual koan or paradox there, that at these higher states where you've learned to refine your consciousness to such incredible degrees, the aim isn't the refinement of consciousness. The aim is to release the tightness of being. And that probably can happen at any point. that kind of relaxation, that kind of release. It's like, as long as there's craving and aversion, and as long as that craving and aversion is even for altered states of consciousness and for refined states of consciousness, you're still in the game. It's still in the craving game. And as long as that efforting is happening and that tension is there, that awakening is going to elude someone. So I think there's just something about, it's not about higher states and stages, but do those higher states and stages allow you to loosen the grip of me and mine and I? Or do they actually exacerbate it into my states of consciousness, the ones I like, the refined ones, that kind of developing a kind of meditative ego? Totally possible, especially when you get a taste of those higher states. I mean, that's it. Like, but letting go is something, for some reason, we have to work really hard at. I do, at least. And I don't know who it was. It might have been some meditation teacher who said, meditation, all it is you going like this and just opening your hand. That's the whole practice. It's just you're moving from a fist to an open hand. I don't think the higher states and stages necessarily, again, it makes it more likely, yes, because the mind is in a particular state, but the capacity for the ego to grasp onto those states is also very possible as well.
I guess one question it raises is if it is possible at any moment, like, so, and even when you get advanced, that has its own pitfalls. Is there something to people who want to do more like of the direct approaches where instead of this intense meditation, they're trying to do techniques to get this awareness much more directly?
Yeah, I think there are. I'm not in any way, like, I don't really know those techniques. I mean, there's like Advaita Vedanta, like pointing out directions. I think Sam Harris is really big in this, like the awareness of, just being aware. In the headless way, I love all that stuff. And I'm not super familiar with it. And I've certainly had those experiences, and those are accessible. But I think there's something deeper. And I think the notion of Buddhist emptiness is pointing to what's deeper. It's like, that's still, like, what we're looking at is fabrications, constructs. And even the, that awareness that's always present, that doesn't me, it seems to still be a fabrication. And what's beneath that? That's really interesting to me. What's beneath the fabrication of this moment? And what Buddhism is saying is emptiness. And that rich source of whatever that might be, what is it in the Torah, in the beginning of the Old Testament, tohu vavohu, void and emptiness, or however you want to say it. There was nothing, formlessness. I think so I don't know about the direct approaches. And for some people it'll work great. And for other people, I think they're really pointing out instructions. That's what it's called. That's why I think it works really great for people. And, I'm a fan, but that's not what I'm super practicing per se.
So it kind of is something worth trying, but it might not work, and it also might not get to the deepest truths that you think or a hardcore meditation could get to.
I don't know. It's possible. I could be totally wrong. It's just, for me, I find, in some ways I don't even know what I'm looking for anymore. I don't even know I'm just sitting. Okay, I don't know what I'm looking for. I do think there are some real clear traditions that have what you're looking at. In the Theravada tradition, very clear 4-stage model. In the Zen tradition, very clear Kensho and Satori. And so those all sound great to me. I'm interested. I'm definitely interested in all of that. I think what's dissipated is the belief of perfection. That somehow I'm going to have some experience which is going to remove all of my imperfections. That there's not going to be a personality left. I think that's the model I think we inherited, and I think that's the model that's often promoted in the traditions, is like awakening is the perfection of a human being. And I think that we see over and over and over people having genuine awakening experiences and still acting really badly. So, and maybe when I become awakened, of course there will be an I that becomes awakened, I'll be like, you know what, Ari, I was completely wrong. There is perfection. I am awake.
That's when we know to be nervous, once you think that.
I mean, probably. I don't know. It's very confusing. The whole thing, the whole topic of awakening is very confusing.
Do you think, since we're just touching on this, people who reach these very high states, either awakening or something close to that, it just is an internal bliss or internal realization that doesn't translate into them necessarily being good because they still sometimes do these bad things? Or is it just that more likely they'll be good? I don't know. Like what does it accomplish if there are so many cases where they do bad things afterwards?
Yeah. I mean, it's like I'm not worried about other people. I'll see it when I get when I get there. I'll worry about it then. So it doesn't stop me from practicing. Like I don't really I still find again the rewards of practice are good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. It's the difference though between states and traits, right? We can get into very high meditative states and they're impermanent. Is it possible for those states to become deep traits of our personhood? I think so. But looking at the evidence of people who have claimed certain states that are now traits, or maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're having states of awakening, but they're not necessarily integrated into traits. And maybe that's where the real work happens, is digesting those insights in that awakening. It's kind of like psychedelics. You get really profound experiences on psychedelics. But if you don't integrate them into your life, it takes work. That's like the hard work. Dealing with all the personality stuff. But I'm not open to this idea that there are experiences which radically shift the trait system at the deepest level. I just don't know anybody who that's happened.
Right. I guess it also raises the question if even people who reach these, they reach these high states often do these bad things. It doesn't seem like then it's worthwhile to go through the whole meditative path. At least if that's the goal, is to avoid doing anything bad. There are more direct ways one could work on themselves, right?
It's true. And it opens a really important question. And that's the complicated one. It's like, well, is it worth it? If the gurus and the masters are, fornicating and drinking and acting badly, why am I working so hard for some state that may never become a trait? And certainly doesn't, make my effort necessarily. I don't want to effort that. Doubt can come in, the hindrance of doubt. And that's the problem with teachers who fail. That's the problem with gurus who act badly, is they sow the seeds of doubt in their disciples. And that doubt is really destructive. It can be. Personally, again, I don't like when teachers fail. It's deepened me as I watch the process of enlightened masters. It deepens my questions. It deepens me to ask what's really going on here, what's really needed. And so it's just the curiosity about that, which I really don't have an answer to.
I guess maybe one way to look at it is it seems pretty clear that people say that they get, relief from suffering and these insights into, consciousness and experience. And then hopefully it will spill over into, good traits too. But there's no guarantee of that. And one has to independently, I guess, work on that regardless.
I think so. And plus for me, most of my wounds are not from being by myself. Most of my wounds are relational. I don't think meditation will necessarily heal in a fundamental way those relational wounds. I think only being in relationship with myself and with other people in an authentic way may help me heal those. So in that sense, I don't think meditation necessarily is going to heal those broken parts of us that are relationally damaged. You're very solitary. Meditation is a very solitary activity.
Okay, I guess just to end more on a practical note, you mentioned before someone could just try meditating for 5 minutes. I know the book has a higher minimum of, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes or something like that. So do you think they start at 5 minutes and then they need to work their way up to 45 minutes? Or are there benefits they might see earlier on? Just in terms of practically what someone should try.
I would suggest trying whatever. This is what I say. Whatever is that amount of time where you're not efforting consistently. Meaning, if 5 minutes feels good to you and you can leave feeling good with those 5 minutes, great. If 5 minutes feels like at minute 3 you're efforting and it's like looking at the watch and that's consistent every time you sit down, then go down to 3 minutes. and work your way up. The minute that you have willpower in trying to sit, it's going to fail eventually. If you're using willpower to sit for a certain amount of time, it's going to not be sustainable. What you have to do is find a sweet spot for yourself and work up the time. But the working up is going to be organic. It's going to be at its own pace. It's going to be at its own time. And you just need to be gentle with yourself. There is no ideal. There is no idea. Will you go deeper in 45 minutes? Yes. Will you also maybe burn out because you're forcing it? Absolutely. Will you go deeper on a retreat? Absolutely. Might it be too much for your system? Absolutely. Someone's got to be discerning, but don't push it. Less is more. Less is more, for sure.
Right. I guess just one question there is like so many skills in life, you need to push yourself and have deliberate practice and work at it to really advance at it. And so it seems meditation is somewhat similar, but then it seems it messes it up if you push too hard. So how do you balance that?
I think it's also push too hard in anything. You're going to burn out. I mean, think about it. Like if you push really, really hard without break, you're going to burn out no matter what it is. Yes, deliberate practice. Yes, it's going to be hard at times, for sure. But if there's not a moment of respite, of relaxation, and someone other than the exceptions like David Goggins, right? Like there are people who can just push. Most of us are going to burn out with that. So I think that meditation is a balance like everything else. Practice hard, not hard, but smart. Be diligent, but don't forget to relax and enjoy the process.
Okay, so I guess maybe one way to view it is some level of effort, because otherwise you'll just do 1 minute and never get anywhere, but to always make sure it's balanced with like enjoyment and, some kind of where it's like a positive experience overall.
That's right. We need a drill sergeant and we need grandma. We need the drill sergeant to say, you need to meditate. Enough of this, Ari. And we need grandma. Grandma, I need some cookies and milk right now, and I need to be wrapped up in her caftan or whatever it's called, Afghan, right? You need both those characters in your life. If just the drill sergeant's there, it's going to grind you into the ground. If just grandma's there, you're going to be sitting around with cookies and milk all the time. You got to figure out, as a practitioner, what are you needing right now? Are you needing a little grandma, or are you needing a little more drill sergeant?
Okay. Yeah, I think that covers the main things. Thanks so much for this discussion. It was very enlightening. I hope it'll be enlightening also for the listeners.